Salutations everybody, it is Maddie here today with absolutely everything you need to know about The Witcher 3 coming to the Nintendo Switch. Now Nintendo had a banger of an E3 with a fantastic direct, but one of the biggest surprises was absolutely The Witcher 3 legitimately coming to the Switch. We had seen leaks before, I had covered them, and then it actually happened, and I easily spazzed out way more than I had expected. Oh my god, they're actually fucking doing it. Oh my god, no. Yes! Yo! Oh my god, no way! With that said, since the announcement of The Witcher 3 on Switch, we've received a lot of information from both CD Projekt Red and various news outlets that I want to compile into one video today because it's been a while since I've done a playthrough of The Witcher 3, so I'm really looking forward to getting back, and what this version really contains is quite impressive. So let's get started with the resolution. CD Projekt Red had confirmed that it's 540p on handheld and 720p with dynamic resolution enabled on screen. So those are some, I guess, underwhelming numbers in the scheme of things, but when you think of the scope and scale of The Witcher 3, I think it's a little understandable that naturally the resolution has to get knocked down a peg, which will be a common theme throughout this, but the trade-off is you have The Witcher 3 on the go, and based off screenshots, which you can see a couple here and we'll use them throughout the video, is that the game still looks solid. It still looks good for what it is. I mean, look at what The Witcher on Switch is going to contain. This comes from the Witcher Twitter account. Besides the base game, both expansions and all 16 pieces of DLC will be on a single card. The box version of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Complete Edition contains stickers, a map, and the Witcher Universe Compendium, which you can see in this screenshot right here, which looks sweet as hell. It is easily a love letter to the franchise in a way and gets people excited to pick up the game yet again. Very smart move on CD Projekt Red's part. But we were talking about hardware trade-offs a little bit, and UI coordinator Alvin Liu had actually told Video Game Chronicle that Saber had to make hardware trade-offs for the Switch edition, including shorter draw distances and less foliage. That being said, Liu said CD Projekt Red is really happy with how The Witcher 3 plays on Switch. Now we're going to pause the information for a second here because I want to give my thoughts a bit on the hardware trade-offs. I think the most recent example I have of something like this is actually, of all games, Fallout 76 on the PS4. Now this is where my friends play, so that's why I play there, because it is an online game, but there is some serious trade-offs in the terms of draw distance, and since I've been playing a lot of that Battle Royale mode, which I've made no secret I enjoy, the lack of draw distance severely hurts that game. But also when it comes to the Switch, we have games that really benefit from great draw distances in an open world environment, such as Skyrim Special Edition. Granted, it's a 2011 game, or more recently is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which came out in 2017 when the Switch itself had launched. Now, seeing shorter draw distances come to a game like The Witcher 3, where its world is brought to life like any other open world game with fantastic draw distances, is a little disappointing, but hopefully based off these screenshots, it's going to be a little more like this rather than constantly seeing things loading into the environment. I find that one of the most jarring, immersion-breaking experiences, even if it's understandable in the scenario of The Witcher 3 on Switch. Now, Digital Foundry had actually done a video about The Witcher 3 on Switch, and I captured some of their comments from actually a Eurogame article, so let's go over that next. As for settings, this is where changes are more obvious. Switch's 1 GHz clocked CPU has to deal with the game's as-set streaming, physics, and AI, so it could be a challenge holding a stable 30 FPS on what's essentially mobile technology. Based on the footage so far, foliage and characters' draw distances do take a hit on Switch as a result, which we just went over, and so the environment is less populated at range compared to PS4, which naturally is something we expect, but the 30 FPS is personally what I care about. You can knock down that resolution as much as you want. What matters to me is that this game is not going to be jarring all over the place the second combat picks up, action picks up, something happens in the open world. I expect the game to run well given these regressions in, for example, resolution. That's what I hope to see. I think the game will stagger at times. I mean, it's such a massive dynamic world that I think there will be times the game will have a stutter or two, but I really hope it maintains that 30 FPS. What makes me lose some confidence is something like Doom on the Nintendo Switch, where they tried to hit a steady 30 FPS and they couldn't even do that, and that's a much more condensed experience compared to The Witcher 3, which is wide open. Now granted, we've seen, as I mentioned examples earlier, earlier, Skyrim, The Legend of Zelda, great open world titles, function just fine on the Switch. Hell, Skyrim Special Edition on the Switch is one of my favorite versions of Skyrim. So don't get me wrong, they've done it well before. I'm not going to say suddenly The Witcher 3 is going to be a poor version, but I will admit there's a bit of concern on this end. Now, you may have heard me mention Saber Interactive earlier, and yes, the Nintendo Switch version of The Witcher 3 is developed by Saber Interactive, which also worked on Halo, the Master Chief Collection, World War Z, and another new release, Ghostbusters, the video game remastered, which, brings up the point that I have to interject here that, all these games get remastered, even Ghostbusters, but we can't get KOTOR remastered. Absolutely unbelievable. But anyway, they recently released World War Z, which I actually reviewed and rated as a buy because I thought it was an enjoyable game that fit a market that had not been addressed for a while, which is that co-op zombie shooter. But anyway, it was polished from what I had played. Some people had some PC issues that I believe have been fixed now, but what I had played, it was really fun. It worked well. It had a good progression system. It didn't really overdo anything, and it made for a successful co-op game that actually sold quite well. It was put at a reasonable price, so I trust the hands of Saber Interactive to do The Witcher 3 on Switch some justice. They've done a great job with World War Z. We don't know much about Ghostbusters, and well, Halo Master Chief Collection does speak for itself. That is the biggest concern there, because that was easily one of the most broken games on the Xbox One, and it was one of the most anticipated that was a flagship title. Now, while actually the Master Chief Collection will speak for itself to many, we have to realize that this was a multi-developer collaboration, so we don't really know who the blame entirely falls on for the launch of that product. Meanwhile, Saber Interactive had worked on Halo Combat Evolved alongside Halo 2 Anniversary, which are both featured in the Master Chief Collection, and both games that I think turned out quite well. Meanwhile, 343 seemingly was responsible for the rest. So I'm not sure exactly where the entire blame lies, but this is one part of the puzzle that does warrant a bit of caution on the end of Saber Interactive, but given their recent work, it seems like it is in good hands. Right now, it's looking like this version of The Witcher 3 can go either way. With that said, we still have a little bit more information to go over for this game. We learned through the Witcher Twitter account that the game is roughly 32 gigabytes, so don't plan on downloading it. I'd say just get that cartridge and pop that sucker in just to save yourself that download time. And also, the Witcher Twitter account had confirmed that the game does not support cross-saves. So let's say you're playing on the PS4, you're 10 hours in, you cannot cross-save over to your Nintendo Switch, which is understandable, but a little disappointing. You would have at least expected maybe that to carry into the Xbox, given the relationship with Microsoft and Nintendo. But overall, that is the bulk of major information for The Witcher 3 on Switch. We know its resolution, its cartridge size, all the content that's being packed into it, frame rate comments, who's developing it, cross saves. All that stuff is now officially covered, and hopefully you feel more informed about The Witcher 3 on Switch. Now for some personal commentary from me about this game. While I'm extremely excited for The Witcher 3, I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, that I hope this doesn't get that standard Nintendo pass. I'm sorry, but I don't remember any of the last games from Nintendo that have gotten a ridiculously bad review score. I'm sure someone out there will prove me wrong, but I feel like there's always this inherent bias, this natural love for Nintendo, that any score you see for a Nintendo game gets bumped up like 1.5 points, I'd say, every single time without fail, just because A, it's Nintendo, or B, it's a game functioning on the Switch. There is this intangible thing that I totally understand, by the way. There are games that I prefer on my Switch, or previously, before the Switch even existed, my Vita, where I enjoyed the game far more on that specific system just because of a portability factor, or being able to lay in my bed and play a game that otherwise I'd be hunched over my computer playing. I totally understand that factor, but it's just stuff to keep in mind when we naturally start to see The Witcher 3 reviews on Switch pop out, which it's supposed to come out this year, so it's only a matter of months at this point in the year when we do see The Witcher 3 on Switch, and naturally I will be creating a review for this, but I'm surprised we're actually seeing The Witcher 3 come to Switch before we see Thronebreaker, The Witcher Tales come to Switch, which is a way better fit for the Switch, and I think would actually help garner an audience for that game, considering that it actually had sold quite poorly for CD Projekt Red. So these are all things to consider, but I think the most important thing to also mention is knowing that Saber Interactive is working on this, and I think it's smart that they are outsourcing it because they don't want to have suddenly Cyberpunk 2077 fall behind. They have to hit that release date because they do have 2 games planned to get out by 2021, and if they adhere to that plan, then they really don't want to focus too much on the Witcher 3 port and let someone else handle it. But given CD Projekt Red's quality control, I imagine if this version is looking poor, they will delay it. Final thoughts though is I think that there's a stronger version of the Switch coming. Now, friends of mine like Spawnwave Media had actually reported that stuff like a mini Switch is on the way, but also that there is a more powerful Switch that is reportedly in development. And I think knowing Nintendo and also knowing CD Projekt Red, yes, many games could happen on the Switch, but there's no way that something like this is happening, like a 540p version of The Witcher 3, when clearly there is a stronger version on the way that will bump up the resolution, maybe even the frame rate, and be able to handle games like The Witcher 3 much easier, because there's a new wave of games coming, there's a new generation coming, and eventually, while the ports are being enjoyed and loved by gamers across the world on the Switch, that excitement will fall off when we start to see bigger, crazier games on the Xbox Scarlet and the PlayStation 5. So Nintendo needs to have a backup plan and release a more powerful version of the Switch where it could continue its port business, because giving games a second life on this platform has really aggregated an audience, but it could be short-lived if they don't create that better version. But I think also The Witcher 3 existing on Switch highlights that very future. So anyway, those are my thoughts on The Witcher 3 on Switch. Just wanted to add a little bit of myself to this video after the news, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on The Witcher 3 on Switch. Fire away, ladies and gentlemen. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that, as it fuels all the content I create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.